All right, let's dive right in. When you picture a modern city, what pops into your head? Probably those huge, gleaming towers of glass and steel, right? But what if I told you the blueprint for these icons wasn't created in the 20th century, but way back in the 19th? We're about to uncover the hidden history of the skyscraper. So here's the big question. Where did this architectural style, this whole wall of glass thing, actually come from? I mean, they're everywhere now, these sleek, reflective giants that basically define our skylines. But their origin story? Well, it's a fantastic piece of urban evolution. The secret isn't in some high-tech lab or a modern design studio. It's right in the heart of downtown Manhattan. And the crazy part is, it's been hiding there, in plain sight, for over 150 years. To find the real ancestor of the glass tower, we have to go back in time. Okay, so our story starts in the middle of the 19th century in New York, in the neighborhood we now call Soho. Back then, it was the city's commercial core, just an exploding center of factories, department stores, and hotels. And all that explosive growth created a massive architectural problem. I mean, think about it. If you're running a factory or a store, you need huge open floors and tons of natural light for your workers and customers. But the old school buildings, made of heavy, load-bearing stone and brick, they just couldn't deliver. Their own weight limited how big the windows could be, which left the insides all dark and cramped. New York needed a breakthrough, big time. And that breakthrough was cast iron. Now, this was a totally revolutionary idea. Instead of spending forever carving stone, builders could now order entire ornate building facades, literally from a catalog. These pieces were mass-produced in foundries, shipped to the construction site, and were ready to be just bolted into place. The process itself was pretty ingenious. A woodcarver would create a really detailed pattern, for a column or a fancy window frame. Then that pattern was pressed into sand to make a mold. You pour in molten iron, and once it cooled, bam, you had a perfect, super strong, and pretty lightweight piece all ready for assembly. This was basically mass production for buildings. And the advantages were huge. Cast iron was way cheaper and much, much faster than stonework. But the most important thing? Iron is incredibly strong. And that strength meant you didn't need thick walls anymore. You could have these slender columns and absolutely massive windows, flooding those new factories and department stores with all the natural light they needed. So you have these beautiful iron palaces, as they were called, popping up all over Soho. But what does this have to do with the glass skyscrapers of the 20th century? Well, everything. This is where the seed for the modern age of architecture was planted. This slide right here really breaks down the fundamental shift in thinking. With old-school masonry, the wall is the structure. It has to hold the entire building up. But with cast iron, the building's weight is held by an internal frame. That fancy iron facade is just a thin, decorative skin hanging on the outside. You can probably see where this is going. And that separation of skin from structure, that was the birth of the curtain wall. See, once the wall no longer had to hold the building up, it could be made of anything. It can be made of ornate iron, or it could be made almost entirely of glass. This 19th century idea is the direct parent of the modern skyscraper. And get this, as if that wasn't a big enough deal, another critical piece of the skyscraper puzzle also debuted right here in Soho. In 1857, inside the cast-iron E.W. Hauthwaite department store, a guy named Elisha Otis installed the world's very first public passenger elevator. So the two key ingredients for building tall, the curtain wall and the elevator, were born in the very same place. All right, now let's jump forward in time, almost a century actually. Those two big ideas, the curtain wall and the elevator, they would simmer for decades before combining in 1951 to create something the world had never, ever seen before, the headquarters of the United Nations. This is it, the UN Secretariat building. Designed by an international all-star team of architects, it was a totally radical statement. And its most radical feature? It was the very first skyscraper in New York to fully embrace that curtain wall concept, only this time, the curtain was made of glass. The sheer scale of it was just breathtaking. The building's two main faces were covered in 5,400 individual windows. 5,400! And they were made of this special blue-green heat-absorbing glass. This wasn't just a building with big windows, this was a building whose walls were the windows. In total, it used over 300,000 square feet of glass. I mean, at the time, no other building in the world had a greater proportion of its surface made of glass. It was a complete and total departure from the stone and brick towers that had defined the skyline until then. And people were kind of shocked. Newsweek magazine famously described it as a cross between Hiroshima, an erector set, and a glazier's dream house. You can just feel the mix of awe and total bewilderment in that description, can't you? The nicknames started flying almost immediately. The staff inside just called it the Glass House. And Vogue magazine, I love this, in a more playful take, they compared its glass faces and solid marble ends to a giant ice cream sandwich standing on its side. So now let's connect to all the dots. Let's bring this story full circle. How do we get from those ornate, heavy-looking iron fronts of 19th century Soho to this sleek, minimalist glass tower on the East River? Here it is. This is the key takeaway. The prefabricated iron facade that separated the skin from the structure is the direct technological and conceptual ancestor of the prefabricated glass facade that does the exact same thing. One was dressed up in Victorian ornament, the other in minimalist modernism, but the core idea is absolutely identical. And this timeline just lays out that whole journey perfectly. It all kicks off in 1849 with the first complete iron facade. Just 8 years later, in another one of those cast iron buildings, you get the first passenger elevator. You fast forward almost a century to 1951, and those ideas culminate in the UN's glass tower. And thankfully, in 1973, Soho was protected as a historic district, preserving the very buildings where this whole revolution began. So, the next time you look at a modern glass skyscraper, you'll know its secret. You'll know that its roots go all the way back to the foundries and catalogs of 19th century New York. Which really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other old technologies are just hiding in plain sight all around us?